Now, what does TryParse actually do? Well, TryParse takes in two parameters and it returns a Boolean. The two parameters it takes in is first, text the input that you want to parse, the string you want to turn into a number. The second parameter is the variable you want that parse result to be stuffed into. What we're saying is we're saying, if you are successful in parsing this text, if you can take this text and turn it into a number, then stuff that number in the yourAge variable. The next thing that TryParse will do is it will return a Boolean, indicating if it succeeded or failed at parsing. I can prove that by doing this. I can say, did parse correctly? And now you see that I'm using, well, just for consistency reasons, I'll put it up there. What we see here is an example of us taking the result of TryParse and storing it into a Boolean for later use. Now, this is a longhand way of doing it. I could have put the int.TryParse inside of these parentheses, like you saw me do at first, but I broke it out because I just really want to make people aware that an if statement is not magical. What goes inside the parentheses is simply any expression that turns into a Boolean, and a variable reference that is a Boolean does turn into a Boolean. And we are allowed to store Booleans in Boolean variables. So again, int.TryParse does three things, or has three aspects to it. A, it needs to know what text it is trying to parse. B, it needs to know what variable we want the result of that parsing to be. And C, it needs to tell us if it was successful in parsing.
And at this point in time, in all honesty, for our beginners, that's all you really need to know. I know the syntax is going to look a bit scary because now we have a method that takes in two parameters, not to mention that we're using that keyword out to make things even more confusing. But as long as you understand what those two different parameters that we're sending in are being used for, you're in good shape. And that the whole TryParse method itself is going to return true or false if it was able to successfully parse whatever was in that first parameter, in this case, text input.
Right. I think you actually did point out something that I kind of forgot to point out to people who might be completely new, is we are taking multiple parameters. The way we specify, or we are taking multiple arguments, the way we specify multiple arguments is by delineating them with a comma. This comma is significant. If you don't have this comma in, you will get a compiler error because the C# compiler will get confused. You have to tell it where one argument ends and the other one begins. Alrighty, so that is TryParse. TryParse allows us to, well, try to parse something.
And we'll come back to this once we've covered scope and once we get into writing methods and reviewing scope, variable scope within methods. Then we'll come back to TryParse and we'll explain it again. And at that point, I promise it will make a lot of sense. At the moment, it's kind of one of those, believe us, it's going to work. Why? Because look, it's working. Ta-da!